chapter 17. Revelation chapter 16 was kind of an introduction. Revelation 17, 18, kind of a summary of the entire tribulation period. This is a difficult chapter to understand, so I hope that you might just take a few notes. I pray that I'll be able to share some things with you that will cause you to thinking, that will enable you to understand what we're looking at here in Revelation chapter 17. Remember in chapter 16 we saw the seven cups of the judgment. Now in 17 we'll see, actually what we're going to look at tonight, I think the major focus of the chapter is the ecumenical system of religion that is going to be prominent during the tribulation period. She's going to raise her ugly head like she's never done before during the tribulation period. Let me just mention this at the very insert. I met a guy at Whataburger when we was traveling this past week, and had to stop, and so I went and got me. When I came in, I saw this guy sitting by himself, and he's a very friendly fellow, and he said hi, and he mentioned how hot it was, and he had a towel around his neck, an elderly fellow. Well, I'm not sure how old elderly is anymore, but he was older than me. So I had to go to the restroom. I went and got me a cup of coffee and came back. But I actually started out the door, and you know, you have those moments when God whispers, here's an opportunity. So I paused and went over there, and I've got some tracts that I purchased a while back. This is one that says, it's a free ticket to heaven, actually. So I just went over to his table, and I said, hey, just want to give you a free ticket to heaven. He looked at it and he said, and I'll quote, he said, I don't read that crap. He said, I don't need that. So he once was friendly and now he's not. And he said, religion is what is destroying this world. I said, hey, I agree with you. Me and you are in agreement on that. He looked at me kind of funny, and then he was reading an article. He said, you see this right here? And he's reading some stuff over about the Middle East. He said, people have been killed over there because of religion. I said, it was religion that killed Jesus. And I talked with him a little bit, but you can tell that he didn't want to talk any further. But let me tell you something. He was right about that. My friend, religion is the enemy of God. Started working on this message last week. I knew I was going to have a busy time, so I was trying to put some things together, and I began to think about religion. Religion, if I was going to define it in a sentence that I could understand, would just simply be man's way to get to God. It's man's way to get to God. It's always by works. Listen, the religion of salvation by works began in the Garden of Eden. Do you recall what Cain did? What was he trying to do? He was trying to obtain favor by his own labor. And then you go on in a little bit further and you got the Tower of Babel. What was the Tower of Babel? They was trying to reach God on their own efforts. Folk, false religion is not something new. It's as old as mankind is. It began there even in the Garden of Eden, and it's been throughout man's history. It was religion that cried out, crucify Him! Crucify Him! That was religion that did that. Folks, that was some of the high priests. The high priest that gathered that mob together. They was jealous of Jesus. Folks, religion and Christianity is two different things. It's two different things. And I think a lot of people don't understand that at all. Well, during the tribulation period, as we will see tonight, we're going to see the church and state come together for sure and join forces. Let's just begin this at verse 1, Revelation chapter 17. And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Now there's some language in here that I don't use in everyday talk. Matter of fact, I don't use it at all. But it's in the Word of God. He says, the angel said to John, John is the one who's looking at this. He's able to see into the future. And one of the angels that had one of the seven cups of the vials that we looked at last week, he says, Come here, John. I want to show you something, John. He says, I want to show you the judgment that the great prostitute that sits upon the many waters is about to endure. This is talking about, and again, a lot of people have a lot of different interpretations on this. But this, to me, is the ecumenical religious system of the world. And folk, it's coming together. I mean, it has been working for years and years, and I'm telling you, it is coming together. Listen, as far apart as Islam and Christianity is, I don't know of any two that could be further apart than Islam and Christianity. Listen, our God is the creator of the world. But as far apart as these two, do you know that you've got religious leaders that are pulling them together? Man. But I'm telling you, it is all coming together, making preparations for what we will look at in this chapter tonight. The great whore, the great prostitute that sitteth upon the many waters. The many waters. The waters represents the nations, I think, or the peoples of the world. Folks, religion is an enemy to God, and if you're standing for God, it's your enemy also. It's your enemy also. These two forces are going to join together for the focus of lust and money. And that's what prostitution is all about anyway, isn't it? It's lust and money. Now look at verse 2. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. This is talking about spiritual adultery. And my friend, when you commit fornication against God, that simply means that you are putting your priority in something else other than God. And we're talking about spiritually here. Religion's number one doctrine is, I can do it. I don't need God. I don't need Jesus. I can do it. That's its number one doctrine. With whom the kings of the earth, talking about the leaders of the world, have committed spiritual fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk. And folks, that's what has happened, and it's getting worse and worse in the days in which we live even today, with the wine of her fornication. The political system will bow down to the religious leaders and form a union, and we'll see that. Let me rephrase that. That is what's going to happen during the tribulation. You and I who are saved, we won't be here to experience it, but it's going to happen. Verse 3. So he carried me away, John speaking now, speaking of the angel. So he carried, again, man, the book of Revelation is what John penned that God gave to him. Keep that in mind. And John was able to see into the future what would happen, and that's what he's talking about here. So he carried me away into the wilderness, and I saw a woman. That's just symbolic. I think it's speaking of the ecumenical religious system. I saw a woman set upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy. Blaspheme against who? God. My friend, religion blasphemes God. It blasphemes God. Having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, what is this talking about? Having 7 heads and 10 horns. The 7 heads, I think, has reference to the 7 nations that has stood or will stand against Israel. The first nation that came up against Israel was Egypt. You remember when Joseph first came into Egypt, things was good. It lasted, I don't know, at least until the leader died, 50, 60 years. I don't remember how long that was, but then things got bad. And Egypt turned against Israel. So that was I think the first nation that stood against Israel. When Joseph died, they entered into about 400 years of slavery. And then the second nation is Assyria. Number 3 is Babylon. We'll talk more about that later. The fourth, I think, was the Medes and the Persians. The fifth was Alexander the Great, or Greece. The sixth was Rome. We'll talk about Rome a little bit later, but Rome stood against Israel longer than any nation, and we'll see a little bit later, she will again. As a matter of fact, she stood against about 500 years approximately. And then number 7 is one that is yet to come, and I think that's the revived Roman Empire. The Roman Empire will be revived during the tribulation period and will join forces. This is when the church and the state will come together and will join forces against God and anyone that has anything to do with God. Now it talks not only about the 7 heads, but it talks about the 10 horns. I think the 10 horns are the 10 nations that will join together for the confederation. Will the United States be part of that? I personally believe if the United States is still standing, she will. She will. I think things are set in motion. Don't you agree with me? Things have been set in motion. Folks, we're not the godly nation we used to be. Not at all. In recent years, in our lifetime, we've seen this nation do things that are against God. We have seen our nations do things against God. And it is getting worse. Notice verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. Let me tell you something. Religion has plenty of money. Plenty of money. And I think this is what this has reference to. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. Then it says, having a golden cup in her hand. The golden cup, I think, probably represents the pleasures. The golden cup represents like what you see at Las Vegas. Full of abominations Abominations is that which is against God. The golden cup is full of abominations that will be used against God and the forces of God. And then it says, and filthiness of her fornication. Let me tell you something. When you stand against God, it's filthy. It is filthy. The filthiness of her fornication. Now look at, that's talking about spiritual adultery. Look at verse 5. And upon her forehead was a name written. To me, this is interesting why they put this in caps. But in the original Greek was written in all caps, by the way. And when they translated it into English, and I thank God that they did this. You know, they put it in sentences and things that you and I can understand. If we tried to go to the Greek, we couldn't understand that. I love the study of Greek words, but for me to sit down and read the Bible in Greek, I'm not able to do that. But for some reason, I've got speculation, but I won't even mention that tonight because it's merely speculation why they left this in particular caps. But anyway, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now the word mystery here is a word that simply means here is something that was not known before, but it is going to be known now. That's what mystery means. Mystery is something not known beforehand, but is made known now. The ecumenical system of the world, by the way, notice it talks about here, the mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and abominations of the earth. Folk, the economical religious system is going to cover the entire world. At the conclusion of this message, I will share with you what the fastest growing religion in the world is today, and some of you are probably going to be shocked to learn which one it is. Notice it says, the abominations of the earth. And notice it talks about Babylon. Do you remember where Babylon came from? It all started with religion. The Tower of Babel. You remember the story of the Babylon begins recorded in Genesis chapter 11. After the flood, the descendants of Noah decided under the leadership of a man by the name of Nimrod to build a monument to themselves to the glory of man. And Nimrod, by the word, Nimrod's name means rebel. Babel originally meant gate to God. So they was going to build a tower to reach heaven itself without going through God's plan. See, behind all false religion is the denial that God is the way, that God will provide the way. In other words, they wanted to become as gods. Going back to the Garden of Eden, do you remember what Lucifer told Adam and Eve? He said, you've got it all wrong. See, God just don't want you to take of this, because if you do, you will become as gods. And I believe that enticed them. And that's the reason why they took of the forbidden fruit. Now, what is the attitude of world religion concerning Bible doctrine? Look at verse 6. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Look at it closely. What's the attitude of ungodly religion against God and Bible doctrine? And I saw the woman, speaking of the system, drunken with the blood of the saints. My friend, this may shock some of you, but it's documented I'm simply stating now that something that you can go and you can prove by documentation. One of the biggest religions in the world is guilty of slaughtering millions and millions of Christians in the Dark Ages. Folk, that's documented. Millions and millions and millions of Christians. I could share with you, not only were the Christians killed, but they were. You think what they're doing over in Iraq, of course, I don't know what all they're doing over there, but some of the things I have heard doesn't even compare to what our forefathers suffered for the cause of Christ. Burned to death. Beheaded was an easy way out. Some of the things they did to the women and to the children in the presence of the moms was awful. If you have never read the Valley of Piedmont or the Fox's Book of Martyrs, and it's documented. These are books that have been proven to be correct. And my friend, during the tribulation period, it's even going to become worse and worse. This is what religion has done against Christianity. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. I don't know where they got that word admiration, but that's not what that word means at all. And I say this with respect, but that's not a good translation. It says, actually what it says, and when I saw her, I wondered with great wonder. I wondered with great shock. John wasn't looking at her with admiration. Why would he do that? That's stupidity. He was looking at her with great wonder. He was looking at her with great shock. That's what the word actually means. He says, it's not admire, but it means wonder with great wonder. When I saw her, I wondered with great shock. He said, I'm shocked to look at this, what this ecumenical religious system is doing to Christianity. My friend, the greatest enemy to Christ, I repeat again, has been false religion. Islam is going to play a very important part in end-time events. Folk, again, I will show you some facts at the end of the message. Islam is taking over this world. There's a possibility that the next president of the United States of America, in this country, right here, the next president could follow that religion. My, we better open our eyes. It's amazing what the devil is doing. Now, I will say this. I've read the end of the book. He's not going to win, but he's going to have a lot of victories along the way. He's going to have a lot of victories along the way. Look at verse 7. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? See, that's explaining what admiration means up there. It means shocked or wonder. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? Why are you so shocked? The angel says. The angel says, I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carried her, which hath the 7 heads and the 10 horns. That's talking about the unity of church and state there. Talking about the unity of the political power joined forces with the religious power. That's what it's talking about here. Now, verse 8, I think, is the key to understanding all of this. And it's not hard to understand. Pay close attention. Verse 8. The beast that thou sawest was. Now, what does that mean? The beast that thou sawest was. He's going to tell us who the beast of the ecumenical religious system is. Now, remember, when John wrote this, somewhere, depending on what calendar you look at, but when John wrote this, it was somewhere around 84 to 96 A.D. when he wrote this. When it talks about the beast that thou sawest is referring to the Roman Empire that was. See, the Roman Empire came in and pretty much took over Israel about 50 B.C. in that neighborhood, and remained in control until about 476 A.D., for about 500 years. So I think this is what he's talking about here. The beast that thou sawest was, that means still is, and then it says next, notice he says, and is not. This happened after John's death, almost 400 years after John's death. See, Rome was, and then it came to a time that it was not. And then notice what it says next, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. What does that have reference to? That has reference to the revised Roman Empire that will be raised up again during the tribulation period, the early part of the tribulation period. So the was speaks of it's now in existence during the time that John wrote this. It will cease to be about 496 A.D. Then it will be no more from about 496 A.D., and it will be no more until, I believe, after the tribulation period begins. And then this is what the angel is saying to John here, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Now it's going to be revived. Again, I think this has reference to the Roman Empire. And it will last about 7 years. Now notice this, and then go into perdition. The word perdition, if you look that up, it simply means will go into ruin or lost. When is that going to happen? The Battle of Armageddon, my friend. Jesus personally will come back and put an end to it. Now notice the last part of verse 8. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder. That's that word we looked at earlier. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Now who is it that is not written in the book of life? That's the unbeliever. My name's recorded in the book of life. Those who are not in the book of life are the unbeliever. This speaks of the lost. And then it says, and they beheld the beast that was, the beast speaking of the system, the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. Verse 9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. Here is the one that's able to understand this. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. I think that represents the 7 nations that stands against Israel. Verse 10. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and one is, speaking of Rome at that time, and the other is yet to come, speaking of the revived Roman Empire. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. A short space, I think, refers to the short space of 7 years, compared to what space was in the future. Again, this was written around 84-96 A.D., so you have to understand that as you look at this. Now then, look at verse 11. And the beast that was, that's the system, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is the 7th, and goeth into perdition. I'm not positive, but I have a suspicion that's probably talking directly about the Antichrist coming out of the religious system. Folks, the Antichrist, that's where he's going to come from. You know, there's been a lot of speculation in years past of where would the Antichrist come from. I think it'd come out of the ecumenical religious system is where it will come from. And I'm not naming names tonight. I'm doing that purposely because I don't know. Yeah, but I've heard, when I was in the seminary, we had all the answers. We knew exactly who it was and everything. But I don't know that anymore. I have found out that I used to, but I don't now. Anyway, let's go a little bit further. And Verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are the 10 kings. That's talking about the 10 nations that I had reference to earlier, and I think the United States possibly will be one of those, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Again, I think that's representing just the brief time of the tribulation period. Verse 13, they have one mind. Listen to this. They have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the system. That's their motive. That's their purpose. Coming together. See, I don't think we recognize this today, but we need to. The ungodly ecumenical religious system receives her power from the political end of it. That's why we better pray about what we're doing here in the next few months, here in the United States of America. Folks, our people's eyes must be opened. They must be opened. Not only should you pray about what you should do, you should pray about somehow that the truth be revealed to the people of our nation. Verse 14. These shall make war with who? The Lamb. But I like this. And the Lamb shall overcome them. Now, friend, I don't care how big they get, they're not stronger than the Lamb. Amen. And the Lamb shall overcome them. For He is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with Him are called and chosen and faithful. That's talking about the saved. And He saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. That simply means that she has infiltrated every part of the earth. Every part of the earth. Verse 16, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. Now listen to this. And shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. But it will be too late. I think at the very end they will realize what they have done, but it'll be too late. It will be too late. Verse 17, for God hath put in their hearts to fulfill His will and to agree and to give their kingdom unto the beast, the system, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest, look at this, is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. We see the place. Where is this city? The great city. I think it has reference to Rome. I could be wrong, but I think it does. I think it does. In conclusion, according to what I have researched, the fastest growing religion in the world today is Islam. The Muslims' growth rate is estimated over 255% daily. Now, listen to this. Why is Islam spreading so fast throughout the world? Well, there's several reasons. We know who's behind it. But there's really two major factors that I think a lot of folks overlook. Number one It's because it's by fear and by force. Force, repression, and in many countries, you either convert or you die. And daddies don't like to see their families killed. And mamas don't like to see their children killed. You either convert or you die. Does that create growth? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Have we not seen that in the last couple of 3 years of what has happened around the world? Sure we have. And then there's a second reason. The highest birth rate of any religion in the world is Islam. Folk, they're multiplying by the thousands and 10,000s through the birth rate. They have a plan, and they're working the plan. Did you know that the top 10 fastest growing nations on this earth are all Muslim? The top 10 fastest growing nations on the earth. When one stops and looks at this figure alone, they should be alarmed. Alarmed. And these nations, not completely, but basically, at one time, had a lot of Christians in them. But when the Muslims came in and Islam took over, the Christians were killed or put out. I get a thing every 2 or 3 days through the internet. It talks about the persecutions of Christians throughout the world. You know where the persecution comes from? It comes from Islam. You can disagree with me if you want to. And I understand that in our nation we have the freedom of religion, but Islam should not have been included in that. When you have a religion that has a Bible that's called the Quran, that teaches in the Scriptures, and folk, I can show you where it is if you want proof. I'll show you in the Quran where it teaches that if they don't accept our God, they should be killed. And you think that this nation would not have had a right to outlaw that religion? My friend, I believe we would have. And I'm more in freedom of speech than anyone you will ever meet. I thank God for the missionary Baptists that have influenced our nation, that we believe that all people should be able to worship any way they want to worship. And I still believe that. All worship is not acceptable to God. But I don't think a people should ever pass a law and say you should worship this way. But when a religion says that if other religions don't abide, they should be killed, that is the drawing line. It should have been outlawed. But we just slept. And we didn't pay any attention to it. And folk, I hate to say this, and I don't mean to be negative, but I'm not sure now if anything could be done. All I can say to you is this. I think the rapture is right around the corner. The forces of evil are upon us. And one day, Jesus is going to come back. And we who are saved are going to be out of here. But what about these poor souls that are left behind? You say, well, they ought to be saved. Yeah, we ought to be doing more to get them saved too. Amen? And as I come to a close of this message, I remind you again, this is not just for information. It's for inspiration. To cause us to do more. I want to close with going back to verse 6, Revelation 17. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great wonder or shock. Folk,